Hey, it's Ed. Before we get started, I want to thank 3 brand new podcast supporters, Tom Cole, FM Weld, and Matt McNally. These 3 guys signed up to be monthly supporters of the podcast through Patreon, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. It really means a lot. If you're interested in supporting the podcast, you can go to mountainandprairie.com/support and check out all the options. Thanks a lot. Hey, this is Ed Robertson, and this is the Mountain and Prairie Podcast, where I introduce you to some of the innovative individuals who are shaping the future of the American West. I meet most of these people through my work in land conservation, or through my hobbies and interests that revolve around spending time up high in the mountains. My guests include ranchers, writers, entrepreneurs, conservationists, athletes, artists, adventurers, pretty much anyone who's doing important work, has an interesting story, and loves the American West. My guest today is Jess Womack. Jess wears many hats, but at his core, he's a rancher. He's the 5th generation to operate his family's ranch near Victoria, Texas, a large-scale cattle operation that uses progressive land management techniques in a very unique landscape. Jess also works closely with Texas Christian University's Institute of Ranch Management, traveling far and wide to teach sustainable agricultural techniques to ranchers and farmers around the world. And on top of all that, he's also a co-founder of Explore Ranches, alongside past podcast guests Jay Klebergand Allison Ryan. Responsible land stewardship is in Jess's DNA and is the foundation of all of his professional ventures. And as you'll hear, he's an open-minded, independent, and critical thinker who's able to speak eloquently on a wide array of sometimes controversial issues surrounding agriculture. When you combine those traits with his rock-solid work ethic and focus, you'll understand why he's been able to establish himself as such a leader in agriculture, both in Texas and abroad. Whether you're deeply involved in agriculture or you've never even set foot on a ranch, you'll gain a great deal of value from Jess's perspective. His knowledge, passion, and worldly mindset are applicable for almost any type of endeavor. Jess and I went to high school together, and even after knowing him for more than 25 years, I still learned a lot from this conversation. We talk about his work with TCU, and he shares some success stories from his time teaching in Panama, Ghana, Nigeria, and Brazil. He explains the importance of community buy-in and how focusing on commonalities and shared goals can help overcome cultural divides. We talk about his family's history in Texas and how he's raising his 2 sons to love and respect the outdoors. Jess also gives a few updates on Explore Ranches and talks about some of the exciting events that they'll be hosting soon. We also chat about his involvement with the Texas Agricultural Land Trust and how conservation easements can be a useful tool for ranchers in Texas and beyond. As usual, we discuss favorite books, movies, and Jess shares the best piece of advice he's ever received, which I especially appreciated. The podcast begins with Jess sharing a funny story about his son, right before we started the actual interview. His sense of humor and love of fatherhood really shine through in that story, so I decided to leave that in before we actually get to the normal standard opening questions. I think you'll enjoy it and get a kick out of it. So here you go, Jess Womack. You know, when you think we were in high school, when we first met, I think we were still listening to tapes. And now we're...
Yes. Yes, we were. Which I still cling on to a little bit, by the way. I have my old tape, little deck, like a 2-thing tape deck in my garage. And when my son and I do some work out there, I put tapes in. So he's like one of the only 9-year-olds that knows what a tape is
in the entire world.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
And then he's gotten into this trot lining thing and loves it. And so we bought all the gear or bought all the materials for it. I showed him how to make a trot line. And for out at the ranch, we've been catfishing the past few weekends. And I come home last week to my backyard. There are, I don't know, half a dozen trot lines strung all the way across the backyard. And he's got 2 of his buddies helping him tie hooks and leaders and everything onto these trot lines. And he had brought out the tape player, and they were listening to Waylon Jennings' greatest hits tape. And I said, well, I mean, my purpose on Earth is done now. I'm finished. I'm good.
You won. You are the best father in history. That's it. That's awesome. That's great.
Man.
To try to make it sound somewhat like we know what we're talking about.
Sure.
The way that I normally start these interviews is I ask people, when you meet somebody for the first time and they ask you that question that can be somewhat annoying, but they say, what do you do? How do you answer that?
Yes, I've heard that several times. I've heard at least a couple of your guests kind of chuckle at that question because they're not really sure how to answer that. And so I'm kind of the same way to most people. I say that I ranch and do some stuff and help my family out in some other business stuff. But I ranch and I teach also and do some international seminars on natural resource management with the institute, the TCU Institute of Ranch Management.
That's a very humble way of explaining what you do, because you got a lot of stuff going on. I don't know how you do it, but I think I was trying to think of how we dive into this. I think maybe the best way to do it is just talking about TCU and your role there, because I feel like kind of everything you do touches land and land management, and I want to talk about all the different facets of that. But maybe let's talk about TCU first. Can you just talk a little bit about that program and exactly what you do there?
Sure. TCU's in Fort Worth. It's Texas Christian University. At that university, they have a ranch management program. It's a 2-semester certificate program. It's been going since 1956. And what it teaches is ranch management is kind of a misnomer. It's really about the business of ranching. And if you really want to get particular, what we teach is it's a business-based approach to sustainable natural resource management. Mm-hmm. And that's a mouthful, but that's what we do. And the methodology is that they can take a graduate, we can take a graduate from that program, place them anywhere in the world, and they will analyze the natural resources available to them and find out the most economical and sustainable way to manage those resources, starting with the soil. We like to say, you cannot be sustainable, first of all, if you are not economically sustainable in your operation. Yep. And so, and then years ago, they started an institute, was founded. And then, let's see, it's probably, 10 years ago, a little over 10 years ago, I was in Brazil for the summer. I was in between my master's, 2 years of master's program at Boston University. Mm-hmm. And I went down to work for John Carter. And what I was interested in is getting a master's in really environmental policy, and I really kind of focused in trade policy, and I focused down on how environmental and trade policy could affect sustainable agriculture, especially in Brazil. And so I was working for him, and during that summer, I realized that the need for not only more managers in Brazil and in agriculture in general, but also how we could really direct the institute. And at that time, one of my professors from the program is in charge of the institute, Jeff Geider. Yep. And I emailed him, or maybe even used Skype. And this was in 2008. And I said, you need to get down here because I think we have a path forward for the institute. Because the institute had just been doing kind of exploratory and good trips and taking alumni and graduates down, around various parts of the world on 2-week-long trips. And I said, I think we can do something with this. And so he came down with our dean, and we toured around Mato Grosso and decided that we wanted the institute to go forward teaching the methodology of the program and teach it internationally, and apply those same principles. So that's what we do. And we have had projects and have projects in Panama, had projects in Brazil, worked a little in Ghana, currently working with a group from central Nigeria, Kaduna State University in Nigeria. We are talking to some folks in Kazakhstan right now.
Wow.
Had some interest from Vicente Fox. He has a foundation, or an institute, in Mexico. He was president of Mexico a few presidents ago, if you remember him.
Yeah, I do. Very good-looking man, I must say.
Yeah, for sure. I haven't met him yet, but he's friends with the provost at TCU. And anyway, so we had some interest in various parts, and right now our main and we've done some work in Scotland the past few years too. At the Royal Highland Show, we've put on, spoken there a couple of times, and we're working with the James Hutton Institute in Scotland. I'm trying to get a program going with them also, and the Scottish Rural Leadership Program. Our most active programs right now is in Panama. Mm-hmm. And we have taught seminars to the National Cattle Raisers Association down there. And we teach a course every summer, a 2-week course at the University of Panama, their ag campus in a little city called David. And now we're working with their Department of Agriculture to start up a program at their National Institute of Agriculture outside of a little town called Chitre, to train their version of NRCS agents and support technicians for producers.
That's just, and the thing is, that's just a fraction of what you do. Like that's,
yeah.
So for my knowledge, I mean, when you name off all these different landscapes all over the world, I don't know the details, but I would imagine that, when you hear Scotland and you hear Panama and you hear, just places all over Europe, Asia, Africa, I would imagine the landscapes are extremely different. The rainfall is extremely different. So do you have like a model that you've developed at TCU, and then you show up in these places and you can plug in a bunch of different variables and then it tells you kind of how to move forward? Or does it require getting on the ground and kind of building a model from scratch? I mean, how do you get your head around these extremely variable landscapes to be able to, advise on being as profitable as possible?
Yes, and and it's very interesting. Every single one of them are very different, as you well know. Landscapes, ranching, challenges, various things are vastly different in a lot of ways across Texas, let alone the United States and the world. Well, we take the methodology taught by the program, but we tailor it to whatever group's needs that we're talking with. And we talk usually before we visit. We'll have an initial visit, and we just really our biggest and first question always is, what do you all need or want from us? Mm-hmm. And the answer depends. It's different for different groups. We taught last summer, 2 summers ago, we taught a course to small dairy farmers in Panama through the United Nations, the FAO, Food and Agriculture Organization. And that's what we asked them when we first got up in front of this group. And we said, yes, we are mainly ranchers, but really and truly, we want and we teach, and we want to teach you all and help you all. Hey, producing a pound of beef has a cost.
Yep.
And so really it makes very little difference whether that's a pound of milk or a pound of beef. A lot of the same management issues and challenges. And so we taught dairy producers for about a week, which was really interesting to me because I worked for a dairy in college. Just to get outside, I needed to get outside or I was going to go crazy. So I worked for a guy 4 years out there, and it makes me really, really grateful that my family's in cattle ranching. I mean, it's a 365-day a year, twice a day job, and they don't take a break. So my hat goes off to dairy farmers.
Oh, yeah. Holy cow. Well, so when you think about all these places you've been, I mean, you mentioned Panama, and that seems like that is a huge success story. But like either within Panama or in any of these other countries where you've operated, is there like a kind of a story that comes to mind, or like a case study that you just think of as a real success? Like you showed up and were able to spread some knowledge that they may not have had before, that had some pretty tangible effects on their operations and their ability to be profitable.
Definitely. And much like in the United States, anywhere, one of the biggest challenges facing producers is keeping records. Because if you don't know how much something costs you to produce it, you don't know if you're making or losing money when you sell it. And that's this way, like I said, here in the United States, Texas, everywhere. I'd say most producers do not keep those records, either by choice because they don't need to or care to or don't have the time, they have other jobs, or they just they do things in a traditional way and whatever. But we have had people around the world come up to us when we return or come back and say, they're very proud. They want to show us their record keeping books and inputs, and they're really happy with that, and said it has helped their operation in one way or another. And so that's been very satisfying. And that class at the University of Panama is very, very rewarding too, to watch these young people get into agriculture. It's fascinating to me, and at least in Latin America, and that's where we've had most of our experience, is pretty much every seminar we've taught across Latin America, 50% at least of the participants are female, which
Really?
is somewhat uncommon. Yeah, especially in the United States. You think of agriculture, and of course there are stars in agriculture that are female, but 50% of our classes, and that's really been astounding. And a lot of them do not come from agricultural operations. We have had one student from that class come up to TCU and go through the year-long program at TCU, Ranch Management Program, and he is now back at the National Institute in Panama, and he is helping to kind of revitalize that area. It's several thousand acres, and it's a beautiful piece of land with just great infrastructure. It's been ignored for a while, and they're revamping and putting money into it. So it's really an exciting project.
So my wife, who used to work in the international development world and would, go to different countries, mostly developing countries, and try to help with different challenges that were going on. But one of the biggest challenges she had was that you have to have community buy-in for what you're doing. It can't be, the office full of white folks show up with, with all these just answers, thinking that they're so smart. I mean, it has to be, there has to be this legit community buy-in. And I even see that in my world of land conservation. I mean, I'm in Colorado Springs, and I go down to a rural area, and there has to be buy-in from that rural community. It can't just be me sitting in an office coming in with all these great ideas. So how do you balance that? Because, I mean, you are bringing great ideas, but at the same time, you have to have that buy-in. So how do you walk that fine line? Because I would imagine that's probably even more challenging than some of the technical agricultural practices you're putting into play.
Most definitely. One, we start out with somewhat an advantage because ranch management around the world has alumni and a good reputation, and they know that we're producers.
Yep.
They know that we are actively involved and currently involved in the industry itself, which gives us a step up, or in legitimacy. So right there. And also, Jeff and I are very, very careful when we get to start working with a new group or get to a new place where, yes, I mean, in the NGO world, and especially in environmental and agriculture, conflicts in some of these places, we do not want to appear as, the American that's wagging our fingers at them, telling them, what to do and what not to do.
Yeah.
And that's why we definitely start off all of our relationships is what would you like us to do? And we don't have all the answers, and we point out all the mistakes or a lot of the mistakes of the cattle industry, what has happened in the United States, and trends and ranching. And, we make mistakes every day because we actively ranch. And so we're quick to point that out. And that gives us a lot of buy-in. And it doesn't work with all groups. Brazil, it was a challenge more so there just because Brazil gets picked on a lot, and ranchers in Brazil get picked on a lot. We have this vision in mainstream type media that, cattle ranching and the ranchers are just going around with Caterpillar D9s and mowing down the rainforest, which is simply not the case. Ranchers in Amazon proper in Brazil are required to keep 75% of their ranch fenced out in forest reserve. Not to mention the areas, depending on the state, how wide, but all riparian areas. They have to fence out all riparian areas, which, as you well know, if you walked up to a rancher in the United States as a government employee and said, you're going to fence out 3/4 of your ranch and not produce off of it, we'd have a revolution on our hands.
Oh, yeah.
Not all of those ranches are legally in compliance, but the ones that I worked with and that John Carter has worked with Alianza were either in compliance or working to get into compliance with that forest reserve area. But, we've taken groups of ranchers to several different places around the world. And that's been interesting and that's how another way we get buy-in is, we're all very different in different parts of the world, but you sit around a fire or sit around a dinner table, and then all of a sudden, everybody realizes that we have many, many of the same challenges. Now, they vary in scope and they vary in, the details, but, is it challenges on getting, good and reliable labor, or input costs that are increasing and machine costs that are increasing, marketing, and challenges in marketing and how to get the best price for your beef and your cattle. And so we sit down and when we start off a class, we will do that and list some of these challenges for your particular area and for your country, and we make these lists. And the list, I have years of records, and they're always so similar. In fact, they're pretty much the same every time. And so that's another way you could start to get buy-in, and just realizing that, well, these exist, a common misconception around the world is we say we're from Texas and they picture J.R. Ewing and we have oil just flowing out of the ground and fat cattle and life is great.
Yeah.
We have droughts and we have government policies and regulations and I'm like, oh, okay. So life is not like Dallas,
Yeah.
Which is fun.
Well, speaking of these misconceptions, this is something I've wanted to ask you about for a while, but there are all these very well-meaning people, I think, and I see this stuff on social media or on the internet, and there's this endless stream of comments from people saying that cattle are terrible for the environment. The best thing you can do to stop global warming is to stop eating beef. And I don't think these people are trying to trick anybody. I mean, I think they believe that. But on the other side of the equation, a great friend of mine who's been on this podcast twice is Jim Howell, who's one of the founders of the Savory Institute. And their whole deal is graze livestock to fight global warming. And we need those grasses to sequester carbon. And, so there are these two. And that's the side I fall on. I mean, and I've read many a book about it, not as many as you. But so where is the disconnect there? I don't get it, because I don't want to argue with people, but when I see these memes or whatever about how bad cows are. I know it's not true, but what am I missing there?
Well, it's like, you name it, debate right now, especially today, that that's been oversimplified, and it's a much more complicated picture. And you alluded to some of those things. I mean, well-managed grasslands do indeed sequester carbon. Also, grasses that have adapted over millions of years to be grazed. If they are not grazed, then they're going to go down in population, and invasive species will eventually come up. And cattle also, that part of the debate is that, yes, cattle, well-managed grazing systems actually work very well with wildlife and biodiversity. Now, if people want to, I think most of the objections to eating beef centers on the fact that most of our cattle in the United States are fed in feedlots. Yeah. And a lot of people, or some of those folks that you were talking about, don't like those. Now, and when you take that segment of the industry into the overall carbon footprint when you eat beef, then yes, and water footprint and everything else, that really is going to increase. But that's not necessarily, it's not the industry's fault. I mean, it is in fact economical to feed cattle grain in the Midwest and in the Panhandle. Here in the United States, we have an abundance of it.
Yep.
Now, a more nuanced conversation, we could get down to, okay, why is it economical? Is that right? Well, it is right now. Now, are they watering corn to feed to these animals? Yes, they are, out of aquifers that may or may not recharge over time. But that is a conversation that we could have on whether or not water is priced correctly in those areas or those states or wherever. Because right now, I mean, of course, depending on seasonalities in the markets, like I said, it makes economic sense to feed cattle. And then also, if we didn't feed cattle, it takes much longer and more area to grow cattle for meat, just solely based on a grass diet. But the fact is really that ruminant animals are the most efficient way we have right now of turning the sun's energy through grass into energy and protein.
Yep.
And managed correctly. I would strongly disagree with those people.
Yeah, I think it's just the way of the world these days of people try to boil down an argument that would take multiple books to lay out properly, yes. And they try to lay it out in one sentence so that it is cute on social media. And, I would say that, I mean, it's complicated. That's all there is to it. But, well, thanks. Yeah, thanks for talking about that, because I
get very passionate about that. And what I like to tell people, if they want to have a conversation, and believe me, I have absolutely zero problem with vegetarians or anyone else. It's fine with me.
Yeah.
But, when people start talking, well, how are we going to feed this world, in 2050, and, population increases, and, more consumers arrive into the middle class in some of these developing economies, and they get a taste for protein. And yes, I mean, it is worrisome. But what I like to point out is just use one example, like Brazil. They're improving, vastly improving their genetics and their production efficiencies. But I'm going to say that right now that they have somewhere in the neighborhood of in the 60% some odd of a surviving calf crop, in weaned calf crop in Brazil. And our average in the United States is going to be between 85 and 90%.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So I point to, and in Panama, it's like 45%. In the tropics, it's just harder. You have more vectors, parasites, etc. But so I like to point out, like, if we can, through education, better production, correct market signals, all of the above, get Brazil to go from, let's say, 60 to 85. And they have a cattle inventory of almost 200 million head of cattle. Then without mowing down one extra acre of rainforest, we would produce millions and millions and millions of tons of more beef with the land that is currently in production as we speak. And that's what gets me going when we do these seminars. Like, if you have a guy in Panama with 10 cows and he goes from selling 4 calves a year to selling 8 or 9 calves a year, you doubled his income. And also you did it on a sustainable basis, and no more rainforest had to be mowed down to do that.
Yep.
So my answer to those folks would be, that's how we're going to feed the globe. We got to make this industry more efficient.
Well, one of the things I've always admired about you ever since, we've known each other for way too long. I mean, going back to the early 90s, and is, you're from Texas, you're a Texan, you dress like a Texan, but you think independently, and you don't fall into any sort of formula like that would just be expected. And you've always been like that, and it often leads to hilariousness.
For better or worse.
No, it's always for better as far as I'm concerned. But speaking of that, so I remember when I was at your house a few years ago, and we were back in the backyard talking trash, and you were talking about how you go to certain events or conferences around the country, and how it frustrates you to no end that some of the conversations that people have at these cattle industry events, they veer into social issues that don't have anything to do with cattle, and people all of a sudden are off track talking about gay marriage or gun rights, and people can have their opinions on that. That's great, but it doesn't have anything to do with what you're there for, and it's somewhat of it is a distraction. And I remember you told me you've gotten in a little bit of trouble for just telling people to let's stay on the topic at hand here. Can you just talk a little bit about that? And if it gets a little out of control, I'm happy to cut out. But now, I mean, what's the deal with that? I mean, how do you approach that and deal with some of these folks that get so out of the park with these weird social issues that don't have anything to do with your business? Well,
first of all, I'd like to say I think we as an industry are doing a lot better with that. Conventions can be a little bit frustrating because it's like sometimes I feel like it's going into an echo chamber where we all agree with each other. And those are not the issues that we really need to be talking about. We as an industry need to be more proactive. We're under a microscope for water usage, carbon footprints, animal welfare, all of these things, fertilizers and regulations and chemicals and all of these things that we're under a microscope. We are doing better at that, in my opinion, as an industry, but we need to do even better. I prefer challenging speakers that at these conventions to get some conversation going, and some of agriculture. I'll be the first to admit, but sometimes people feel a little bit picked on. I mean, we all hear about it takes whatever gallons and gallons of water to produce one pistachio nut. And again, that's a larger conversation of whether or not that water is priced correctly and everything else. But, and then the carbon footprint of beef to, carbon footprint of these larger dairies and the animal welfare concerns, confined animal feeding operations, like all of these things. And so the natural inclination for any industry and for any person is to put up a defense, put your defenses up. And I just really try to talk to people in the industry and say, hey, we don't need to put up our defenses. We need to hear these things. Like, I try to read the New York Times every Sunday, even though that's kind of difficult, at times. But I do. And we need to talk. I mean, of course, we're never going to, and we're worrying about whether we're going to convert every member of PETA to come over to our side of the debate. That's not going to happen ever. And so we really don't need to be worried about that. Yes, we don't want to be regulated out of business. So we need to pay attention to stuff like that. But we need to be open to more conversations. I mean, I'm absolutely convinced, and I might be crazy, that as an example, like I think that ranchers, at least on grasslands, one of these days, I hope, will maybe see a source of income from selling carbon credits. So I want to talk about carbon credits and carbon taxes. I want to know how that may work because, and like I say at these things, and when we talk, and other people say this too, don't get me wrong, tons of people, is if we're not at that table, we're not going to even get any input as an industry on the proposed regulations or have a voice as to what exactly it is we do and how we do it. So we need to be at that table. We need to be at all of those tables. It doesn't matter if climate change is man-made or not. I personally believe that it is, and 99 scientists out of 100 will tell you it is, and then the one that doesn't is trying to sell a book. But, but we need to talk about it, and it really doesn't matter who caused it or when it was or anything or who's doing more now. Or the fact is, we're seeing some pretty drastic changes, and we need to react so that we can manage these resources well and produce food with less inputs and less water, all at the same time. So
I think that's great. I mean, I think at the end of the day, everybody's not going to agree on everything. And it seems like nowadays people just have a real problem with the idea of, well, let's just agree to disagree. Because, I mean, there's certain people that I'm just never going to agree with them on certain social issues. And they've got all of their reasons for thinking what they're thinking, and I've got all my reasons, and they're probably all good reasons given our backgrounds. And we're just not going to change. So, and that's fine, as long as we can just have a civil conversation. We're not enemies. I mean, I'm sure there are things that you and I disagree on, but we both know where we're coming from and respect each other. And so we can have those conversations. The idea that is gone or is mostly gone is very odd to me.
Well, you definitely have to search harder to find an audience that would act in that way. I think they're around, and like I said, I think we're getting better in a lot of ways. And but you're exactly right. I mean, it's just so much misinformation out there. I mean, between all natural or grass fed or which is better or fed, in a feedlot or, if you buy it from Whole Foods or if you don't buy it from Whole Foods, like there's a lot. I mean, a grass fed rancher, grass fed beef could be off of a ranch where somebody doesn't really know what they're doing. It could be grossly overgrazed. So I would say I'd rather have the beef from a feedlot rather than that ranch. So it's. There's, and most consumers, and it's not their fault. The public, they're busy trying to make a living and feed their family. They don't have time to read all of this stuff and concentrate on my industry. So we have to find a way, in our industry, we have to find a way to get that out there. Exactly, agree to disagree and put some, have those discussions and talk about it and not, put our defensive up and say, well, this is what we do, and by golly, this is the product that we're going to sell, and we don't care if people understand or not.
Yeah. No, I think that's well said. I'm just glad to know we got guys like you, at these conferences trying to and just representing the industry, trying to have these conversations and willing. You want to have these conversations, and so I think it's awesome. So keep it up. Let's talk a little bit about your personal background because your family's got a long history there in Texas, and I can't remember the details, but I remember last time we were having dinner, you were telling me some story about either maybe your great-great-grandmother or great-grandmother, somebody having to hide in a tree all night as the Comanche Indians were trying to capture her. So I don't fully remember the details. We were probably laughing too hard for me to remember all the details, but tell me about your family.
Well, my dad's side of the family were ranchers, and my mom's side of the family also lived fifth generation San Antonio, and but the ranch was started in the late 1800s by my great grandfather James Alfred McFadden. The ranch is still for the most part in family hands today. I am a fifth generation, and my sons are now going to be the sixth generation. It's on the Texas Gulf Coast, near Victoria in Victoria County.
Yep.
And it's a wonderful place. we partitioned the ranch like a lot of family ranches and family businesses. It happens back in the late 80s. My dad was actually in charge of it. So we got the piece that nobody else wanted, and which I think is the best. And about half of our part of the ranch is covered in wetlands. We're at the confluence of the San Antonio and the Guadalupe rivers. And we put a wetland reserve program easement on it that's through the USDA and NRCS. And it's one of the largest private wetland reserves in the U.S.
Oh, wow.
It's great. And right now, because of the rains that we've been lucky to get, it's all flooded, and just spent the past few weeks off and on down there with my two sons and my family, and we've been fishing and duck hunting, and went down there in December. I mean, there probably was at least 1,000, maybe 1,500 pintails that got up out of the water, off the water, and teal, and just tons of wildlife and bird life. We're one of the ranches in the Guadalupe Delta that every year we host bird watchers for the Audubon Christmas bird count, and the Guadalupe Delta bird count area is consistently in the top 5 in number of species across North America for the Christmas bird counts.
Wow.
So last year I think we were 254 species, and I'm not sure about this year yet because we just had it and they haven't tallied up everything yet.
So when you think about growing up in that family that's been so closely connected to the land, and I ask our mutual friend Jay Klebergand in our podcast, asking the similar question, but what was that like growing up, just knowing that your family, for about as far back as it can be traced almost, has just been so closely connected to the land, to agriculture? Was kind of conservation and responsible land stewardship just a part of conversation that you would have with your dad and the rest of your family, or was it just kind of an unspoken thing that you picked up along the way? Where did your kind of progressive land management outlook come from? And was it a direct result of your dad, or just talk a little bit about that?
Well, I'm lucky enough to have been associated with the businesses, friends and family friends, and my father and my family. A cousin of mine, Bob McCann, is president of both Texas Southwestern Cattle Raisers Association and the National Cattlemen's Beef Association. And he's one of the best producers I know personally. So yes, it was, to answer your question, it was part of the conversation. I grew up learning, knowing about it, was lucky enough to be around it, and some really, really great people that were in the business as well. And growing up around it, that's why I like to get my boys out there. It's just, they come alive, and you see that, and you see what the outdoors can do for people, and working and getting a work ethic. I mean, my youngest son, 5-year-old, this past weekend when we went down, he actually threw a temper tantrum because we weren't going to work the sheep and goat herds. He was not happy with me. I said, "Son, we just don't need to work them right now." He was not happy at all about that. So, and I've worked my 9-year-old for well over 8 hours every now and then when we're working out there, and they sit with the guys and they eat on the catwalk, the tacos or hamburgers with the guys, and yes, kind of how I grew up, and I want them to grow up that way. It's been very special. My mom and my dad were big proponents of conservation. My dad loved those wetlands, so I grew up with that passion too, and watching those thrive with good management. And so, yeah, just all of the above, I guess. It's in my blood, but I also loved it. And then going to ranch management really, really got me dug in. I mean, that got me focused. I loved college, loved getting my master's, for sure. Absolutely loved Woodberry, but the ranch management in this area, it really sent me down that path. And I've always had the international bug and travel bug, and finding, helping with the Institute, satisfies all of those things. So yeah, it's wonderful.
Well, you've worked hard to get that lined up, to be able to check all those boxes. One more question about your kind of history with that ranch. So obviously you love it. I mean, you wouldn't be able to work as hard as you do doing it if you didn't love it. How much of a sense of responsibility do you have, or even like worry that, all right, I'm the fifth generation, I'm going to be handing this to the, passing this to the sixth generation, and I've got to keep this together? Because there's so many pressures that make these big ranches unsustainable in ways, and have to split them up, have to sell pieces off, and that's just no fault of anybody, except it's just economics, really. And so, do you feel pressure about that, just kind of with the family history?
Yes, definitely. I mean, I love that place, and I'd hate to see it split up or sold. I tell my boys, I said, I've told, especially my oldest, youngest isn't quite there yet to have these conversations, but that I would love for them to be able to do something out on the ranch if that's what they want to do.
Yep.
But in the end, just if they don't, I do, and that's fine, and do what they want and what makes them happy and they find their passion for. If it's not agriculture or livestock production, but if that isn't going to be, then I just want to instill upon them and make sure that it's either in the hands of someone else that does, or that they see to it that it's managed correctly. That much I do want them to have a responsibility, a sense of responsibility to feel, and just like I do, because that is our responsibility. That's our piece of land, piece of the little corner of the world. So we do have a responsibility to do right by it.
When you and your brother kind of took charge of the ranch, was it about 10 years ago? Is that about right? 10, 11 years ago?
It was on and off a little bit. And when I got out of ranch management, I got to play cowboy for a few years and live out there. And my wife and I lived in Victoria. It was great. Yeah. Loved it. Then some things happened, that took me down some other roads for a while. And my father passed away suddenly, so I had to go help my mom with some things, and for a couple of years, and just always wanted to get my master's. So I ended up doing that because I love government and policy and trade policy and pertaining to agriculture, because I just fascinated how that drives markets and prices and everything else. So I took a few years off doing those things, and then got back to Texas about 6 years ago. And we've been doing this kind of now this current situation ever since, my mom and my brother and I. And it works well just because my brother is interested in the wildlife, and I'm more. I love the wildlife. Don't get me wrong, but I'm a cattleman at heart, and love grasses and livestock production. So, it somewhat of a symbiotic relationship.
And what was the biggest challenge? Or not challenge, but what was the biggest surprise, like when you took over in this new structure with your mom and when your dad, after your dad had passed away? I mean, you had been watching it and watching him run it, and obviously very, very aware of how a ranch runs. But all of a sudden, when you are officially in charge, is there anything that sticks out in your mind as like, holy shit, I wasn't expecting it to be this hard? Is there anything that sticks out?
Yeah, a couple of things. It is. I mean, how much goes on in the office, to your previous questions, how important it is to, a state plan, things like that. We have a few working oil and gas leases on the ranch, so involved a little bit in that, and making sure that they do right by the surface as well, and pipelines, like all of these things. Like what I found, I guess the biggest thing was that though it was fun, I thank my lucky stars every day that my dad trained me and taught me what he did. And while it was fun, I didn't really have a whole lot of time to just play cowboy anymore. Yeah. I had to get a little bit more serious. So which in some ways was a bummer, but I'm sure my knees are going to thank me for that later on in life.
Definitely. while we're talking about ranches, let's talk about the Texas Agricultural Land Trust. Because
Sure.
when I was down in Austin recently, I spent some time with some of those guys, and they were great. And I didn't even realize it, but that you were on the board until we were texting about it. And so can you just talk a little bit about that organization, what they do, and how you got involved?
Sure. Blair Fitzsimmons, the CEO of Texas Agricultural Land Trust, TALT, asked me to be on the board several years ago. And I thoroughly enjoyed it. What we do is we put conservation easements, if it's so desired, on ranches that are working agricultural lands, whether that's lumber, farming, and/or ranching, or all of the above. And I like, and I'm fascinated by it, and I enjoy it for many, many reasons. And one reason to me is that I think that over the next several decades in agriculture and in the world as a whole, when we talk about climate change, I think we and our policymakers are grappling with ways to, one, how do we put a true environmental cost on the food that we consume? And then also what the Texas Agricultural Land Trust does, recognizes in a way, is these conservation easements to me are a first step, a little step towards recognizing the public benefits provided by well-managed open land. And somehow one of these, and like I said, through either carbon credits or something, but well-managed open lands will, they filter water. They help to mitigate flooding downriver and in urban areas. It's good for biodiversity, sequestering carbon. Like, all of these things benefit the public. Now, that's not recognized monetarily yet, but I think we're struggling to try to find out what, and there's not going to be any one perfect vehicle. I don't think that, a carbon tax or carbon credits are going to be the silver bullet to just fix it. All of these things that we're talking about, they're not. And I think easements are one of those ways to recognize that, because it helps with keeping lands together. And that's why I've enjoyed it as much as I have, and stay doing it as long as they let me, I guess.
So here in Colorado, I used to do a good bit of consulting work with the Cattlemen's Land Trust, the Colorado Cattlemen's Agricultural Land Trust here, and they were founded as kind of an offshoot of the Colorado Cattlemen's Association, and it was a really good partnership because they got the stamp of approval from the Cattlemen's Association, and then all of a sudden, ranchers who may have been anti or not fully aware of conservation easements or not really fully understanding of them, all of a sudden it had the endorsement of the Cattlemen's Association, so they started to consider it. And so over the last 20 years, you've just seen easements become one of the many tools that ranchers use to keep their operations sustainable. And so have you seen that in Texas? I mean, have easements gone from kind of this outlier kind of crazy thing to accepted part of agriculture now? Yes,
definitely. And that has come with education and time, and it's increasing the comfort level. And as you know, there's several different types of easements, donated or purchased, things like that. And TALT is vast majority is a donated easement type philosophy, and and because of funding and various other reasons. But when they first thought of it, Blair Fitzsimmons would tell me stories. That yes, I mean, our founding entities, the three kind of partners, are the Texas Farm Bureau, Texas Southwestern Cattle Raisers Association, and the Texas Wildlife Association. If you would have gone in 15 years ago to any one of those organizations, 10 years ago even maybe, you would have been laughed out of the room with the concept of easements, whether it's, government control or, getting the cattle all off and a bunch of hippies that just want to put conservation easements everywhere and, bring back the 1800s with the buffalo. I mean, all that's gone, but over time, I mean, when my dad and my mom got the easement for the ranch and put it on the part of the ranch with the wetlands, it was to the sheer horror of some of my family members, extended family members. I mean, they thought the FBI was going to be out there from time to time, making sure we were doing everything correctly.
Yeah.
And it's just, obviously, it doesn't work that way.
If only we were that important here in the land conservation
exactly.
community.
And so, I think it's become much less divisive, much better understood, and is now seen as, not for everybody by any stretch of imagination, but for some folks and some operations, it can be a very useful tool of keeping lands together and keeping them in families, and trying to slow down some fragmentation and protecting some sensitive places.
Yeah, it really is a great tool. I mean, it's not a tool for everything. I mean, like any toolbox, I mean, you need a lot of different things, but that is it's been amazing here in Colorado, even just a little bit of time that I've been working in this relative to some other folks. I mean, to see how it has become accepted and can really help save family ranches. I mean, these things are going up for sale. If they can't come up with some money and we're able to get them some money to conserve it, it's really a win-win-win. Pretty cool stuff. So you are a partner with Explore Ranches, and I've had Jay Klebergand and Allison Ryan on to talk about that. And so, obviously people are very aware of that, but can you just kind of give a brief update on what's going on with Explore Ranches and what you guys have coming up?
Yes, very exciting stuff. We are talking with several other different ranches to list on the website, so that is continuing to expand. I actually talked to a friend of mine down in Panama, and if we can figure out how to do it, we might get a listing down there
Nice.
in the rainforest. And then coming up, we're doing some events, a health event Allison's putting on. And in April, we are doing a culinary weekend with a chef from a restaurant here in Austin. The restaurant's called Die Due, and the chef is Jesse Griffith. And we are going to cook a few different meats that came off of the ranch during the day and walk around some and forage and pick plants and berries to add to the meal. And I'm going to make a weekend out of it and maybe drink a little wine. There are 8 spots available, by the way.
Cool.
And so we are selling those spots and then trying to market those spots. People can come down and learn how to cook and enjoy the outdoors.
Nice. I'll put links to all that on the website, so I encourage people to check it out because
Awesome.
I've gotten a bunch of emails from people. Our mutual friend Trey Dempsey, who was a few years older than us.
Definitely.
He sent me an email the other day with Explore Ranches and said, "Hey, did you know that Jess and Jay are doing this?" And I said, "Yeah, I sent him the podcast with Jay, so I'll send him this one." But people are really buzzing about that business idea, and I'm excited to see how it continues to evolve.
Yeah, we've got some super, super beautiful ranches so far, and like I said, getting more, and we're excited about it.
One more kind of broad question about ranching. When you look back, I mean, obviously your father is extremely influential. Are there any other mentors or kind of heroes you have that, and it could be people that you've known over the years, or maybe even people that you've just read books or of, but people that you would consider very influential in kind of your outlook on land stewardship?
Yes, definitely. I mean, yes, first and foremost, obviously, my mom and my dad and my upbringing. And because of the history at McFadden, and my dad was a very generous, kind-hearted person, and so is my mom. Well, the town of McFadden, there's a small little town on the ranch, and up until the early 90s, had even a one-room schoolhouse, a working public school there. And we had a store and everything, and there's a lot of old timers around. Well, they came, a few of them worked for my dad and for us back in the day. And when I was growing up down at the ranch, these guys were just, their stories of the Texas Dust Bowl and, 20s and 30s and, shucking oysters after school when they were kids for 5 cents a pint, and, just a work ethic. Just salt of the earth, just wonderful people. And I got to live with the old principal of the McFadden School District for a couple of summers down there.
Wow.
And so his name was Jack Cohen's. Very influential in my life. And also, the guy who I work with at the Institute, Jeff Guider, has been very much a mentor to me as well. And yeah, like I said, I've been lucky enough to cross paths with some really good folks so far.
Speaking of crossing paths with good folks, we got to talk a bit about Woodberry and brag about what a wonderful place it is. I should know this, but I don't. How did you even find out about Woodberry? How did you end up at Woodberry?
My family knew some folks that had been there, and there were some South Texas ranching families that have a history, like Jay's family at Woodberry. Our friend Grady Cage.
Yep.
I did not know Jay or Grady before we went, but got to know them. But their parents knew my parents. So my parents, like a lot of things, were very forward-thinking and wanted the best for us. And in the end, did not want us to think of South Texas as the center of the universe. I mean, granted, it's God's country, and God lives there, but it's not the center of the universe. 14 years old, I don't remember. I went, and it wasn't like under duress, and I ended up loving it. It was one of the best things that's ever happened in my life. Besides my wife and my kids, of course. We'll put that caveat in there when she listens to it.
No, I say the exact same thing with the same caveat. We need to talk. I need to tell one quick story about the late great Grady Cage, because I remember when I showed up at Woodberry, I didn't know Grady is a buddy of ours that passed away of testicular cancer, and he was about the toughest dude ever. And I remember it was one year we showed up and Grady was walking around and he had this cast on his hand and he was just kind of a little downtrodden, and he was like playing football with this cast on his hand. And I heard somebody was like, "Grady, what happened to your hand?" And he said, "I punched a cow." I mean, that dude was so tough. He could fly helicopters and stuff when he was 16 years old.
No, I think even younger than that, he was flying with his dad.
Right.
When we were at Woodberry, he was flying with his father. And we started at 14. So, he was already doing that, and it had been. So he was a great pilot.
Great. Yeah. Just what a badass all the way around, as tough as they come.
I think the cow was about to run him over, and he punched it, hit a bone, and it broke his hand. I remember that.
So when you look back at Woodberry and that experience, what would you say is kind of the most important lessons learned from that place? I mean, how do you think it directed your life if you hadn't have gone there? How different is your life because of going there?
It's definitely different. How it would have turned out otherwise, who in the world knows? Maybe, I have no idea. But I think that one of the obvious ones, definitely the honor code. I had already, my parents, my family definitely instilled that. So it wasn't like a new concept to me, but having that there is a big part, and it's how I conduct my business. It's how I conduct my life, for sure. And I think we had a great class, and we had some really good. There's some great teachers there, and I mean, spending 4 of your most formative years essentially living. You go to a reunion, and you haven't seen somebody for 5 years, and it's just pick up where you left off. We had 90 some odd brothers. And that was the friendships. I mean, Glenn Pritchett is one of Jay's godfathers. I mean, just lasting, enduring friendships. I think those things are probably what stuck with me the most, and the education as well, and which was great. The Woodberry and Britain program.
I forgot
Mr.
you did
McKenzie. That's probably one of the most formative experiences at Woodberry and in my life when I did that. So
yeah, I think obviously great education, but I think I've probably long since forgotten any of the books I read and all that kind of stuff. But I think just the act of having to work so hard to keep up, I think that skill And it is a skill, learning to work that hard. I mean, I think that is probably one of the things that's carried over to me. I mean, obviously honor system as well, but it's just, it's a damn challenging place. And
it is.
Class on Saturday. When I tell people we had class on Saturday, they're like, what the hell? But I mean, it forces you, there is no break, it's just constant. And, I think
it's constant and it's challenging, but like I've been on the advisory board for a couple of years now and finished my tenure there. But the new headmaster, Byron Olsey, we were talking one of those sessions, and yes, it's definitely challenging. It teaches you work ethic, but at the same time, what is unique about it is like what he said. He said, Jess, like Woodberry is a place where a boy can be a boy for another 4 years. Mm-hmm. And there's something to that. I mean, especially nowadays with everything we have at the palm of our hands and the phones and everything, there is something so special and valuable about innocence.
Yeah.
And maintaining that.
I agree. That was a big benefit of when we were there. And like we were saying at the beginning, I mean, there were tape players when we were there. It's not like these damn smartphones and stuff. And so it's, I'd say it's more important now than ever. And luckily they've been able to keep their values and keep the place running tight, because that's a whole different challenge to do that over 100+ years. Man, we're at an hour, which is crazy. I feel like we just started.
Holy moly! I didn't even look at my watch yet.
But maybe if it's all right with you, we can run through some of these quick questions that I ask everybody, and then I'll let you get back to managing the landscape of Texas. So, when you think about favorite books related to the American West, are there any books that come to mind? Yeah,
I mean, just finished one. It's a little bit older, but I liked it. I like history a lot. There is a book from the mid-'50s. It's called The Big Ranch Country. Mm-hmm. It's by J.W. Williams, and it's about the history and the first couple of generations of some of the larger Texas ranches: Wagner Ranch, King Ranch. 4.6s, ranches like that, and ones out in West Texas as well. And just imagining how those people did it, I will never ever. It was impossible to really grasp it, what they endured, and
it's so tough. It's just a different level.
Yes. I mean, my grandfather. My mom's father got back from World War II. He'd been shot down a couple of times over Europe and probably had PTSD. They just didn't know it back then. And so he told my grandmother, who was pretty much a city lady, he just didn't want to see people for a year. So they went out down to South Texas, deep South Texas, with no electricity. And he rode a mule with the full leg cast on for the first few months, because he had broken his leg in several places, and he hunted off of his mule and worked cattle. And at night, for entertainment, she would shine a flashlight, and he would shoot rats at the foot of their bed in the house. How she put up with that, I'll never know. But and that was in the 40s, and I can't even imagine, like, turn of the century when they first started a lot of these ranches. So, yeah, it's amazing. Great book. It's not on the West. I'm reading in the middle of it right now. It's called The Far Horizons.
I never heard of that.
It's by Christopher Empson, super good, and he lived around the turn of the century for 30 years with the gauchos in Uruguay.
Oh, wow.
And the grasslands out there. And it's a fascinating book, so you might want to look that up too.
Yeah, definitely. Those both sound really good, and I never heard of either. Exactly why I asked. Do you have any favorite documentaries or films of any type?
Well, we've been big into Narcos lately. My wife and I have.
Is that good? Is it good?
Yes. I mean, it's very good. And because my wife calls Latin America my second wife, because besides Texas, I don't know what it is. It's the attitude, the culture, all of the above. I absolutely love it. So, Anyway, we've been watching that.
So in all the free time that you have, which sounds like it's probably about 5 minutes a week, what do you do for fun when you're not working?
Well, right now it's pretty much with the boys. And they, thankfully, maybe through my successful brainwashing, love to fish and love to hunt. And so I encourage that as much as I possibly can. And, travel with the Institute. And like I said, I got the travel bug from my mom's mother a long time ago. And really, really love to travel. My wife does too. So we do that for fun. And
so all the experiences you've had, Brazil, traveling internationally, growing up outdoors, when you think back, is there a certain experience that comes to mind as being like the most powerful outdoor experience you've had? And so powerful could be scary, it could be funny, it could be just a memorable experience. Is there anything that comes to mind as like, yeah, that was about as intense as it gets?
Yeah, couple. One, outdoor wise, you don't know him because you came to Woodberry sophomore year, correct?
Yeah, that's right.
Yes, yep. Sophomore year. So our freshman year prefect on the freshman dorm, Turner, was Ward Malloy's good friend, very good friend. About 7-8 years ago, I went with him to Alaska. He drew a caribou tag in the Kenai Peninsula, wow. We hiked, and he got one with a bow. Getting that meat out, we forded streams. We hiked for 18 hours straight to get back to camp with our first load.
Holy cow.
We ate like 2 or 3 MREs each, and the next day we did it again to get the rest of the meat out. I was by the end of that, and when we were almost back to camp, I was counting my steps. I've never been that physically. It was the most physically challenging thing I've ever done in my life. We get to this ledge, and it's just lush and wet and green, and sun had gone down. It's like whatever it was, 10 or 11 o'clock at night, and I slide like Romancing the Stone style, from the top and slide all the way back down with 50, 60 pounds of meat on my back. And I looked up at Ward and I said, "Ward, you go ahead, man. I'm just going to take a nap." And he said, "Jess, you have 50 pounds of bloody meat on your back. You will be eaten if you take a nap right there. You have to come up this hill." And I said, "Oh, okay." So I made it. It was so hard. Oh. And then the other one in like Ghana, as far as the Institute goes, I went to Ghana by myself. Jeff wasn't able to go on that one trip. And went to Accra and traveled to a little town called Adidome in the Volta Delta region. And we were working with a group of cattle farmers there. And I was by myself. And then it's a little town, but it was a nice little hotel. And it was managed by this 12-year-old girl and her 14-year-old brother. And it was clean and fun. But the mayor or the chief of the town heard I was there. So I had to go have lunch or dinner with him or lunch. I had lunch. And I'm pretty sure it was the water that they were washing the dishes in and not the food, because it was like fish head soup and it had been boiled. But yeah. So I ate and I couldn't insult the man. But, well, sure enough, I get sick. So for the next 3 days, I live on watermelons. They grow a lot of watermelon. And there was one tiny, tiny little store, and the only thing they had there was saltine crackers. I lived on watermelon and saltine crackers for 3 days, and I rode around on a dirt bike. With 2 other fully grown African men around these dirt trails to go see all of these, their farms that they wanted me to see. Yeah. And I was just weak as a feather. I mean, it was so weak. And finally I got to feeling better and spent most of the afternoon and I was feeling better. I was spinning in bed and I get up and the boy who ran this hotel was named William, because that's my brother's name. And I said, "William," I said, what can I get to eat?" He said, "Well, there's no restaurant and there's no store here." And I said, "Okay." And I look across a dirt road and I said, "Who owns those chickens over there?" And he said, "Oh, that lady in that house over there." And I said, would you go ask her how much she wants for a chicken?" And this hotel had a kitchen. They just didn't have any food. It just had a small little kitchen. Yeah. So he came back and he said $5 a piece, which, whatever. And so I said, "Okay, William, here's $20. I said, you keep 10 for yourself and your sister. You buy 2 chickens." And I said, "If you would, please, You and your sister kill the chickens, clean the chickens, and let's fry the living hell out of these chickens. So I'm not going to get sick again. And you have a bag of rice. So we're going to have chicken and rice. And that was the best fried chicken I've ever had in my entire life.
That's great. That's awesome. That's really funny. So if you had to pick, I bet I know the answer to this, but if you had to pick one location in the West that's your favorite, where would it be?
Wow. To be honest with you, in the West, it is really, really hard to beat Allison Ryan's ranch.
Oh, really?
It is absolutely one of the most gorgeous places I've ever been.
That is an unbelievable looking property. And I've never, I didn't know that Texas had landscapes like that. It's just crazy.
I love West Texas. It's gorgeous. It's absolutely gorgeous.
Very cool.
Especially the Davis Mountains.
Oh, yeah. Very cool. So this is a hard one, but if you had to pick, what is the best piece of advice you've ever received?
Ooh. Well, I'll tell you. And that's actually not that hard of a question. One of the most memorable and one of the best, I'm not sure if I can say it's the best, but we showed up at the Woodberry in Britain program, and Woodberry had a manor house outside of London in a little town called St. Neots. And Mr. McKenzie, the teacher there, took us in, sat us down right off the plane. We were dead tired, and gave us a quiz. This was junior year at Woodberry, so we were 16, 17 years old. And he gave us a quiz, what's the population of the world? What's the difference between Shia and Sunni? Who's the prime minister of the United Kingdom? And, what's the population of the United States? And we failed. All of us failed miserably on a lot of those questions. And he looked at us. He said, right, wrong, or indifferent, you as Americans, you as Woodberry students, you as, whoever you are, you have a civic responsibility, a social responsibility to be educated and know and be involved in the world. Mm-hmm. And I've lived my life a lot like that. And I do believe that. And I think the world would be a better place if a lot more people felt that social responsibility to the rest of the world and population, and also educate themselves so that we can have some of the conversations like you and I were just talking about. And so that kind of, that really put me on a path, and that was a memorable moment in my life.
That's great advice. I don't think I'd ever heard that story, but that's great advice, especially at that age. I think it's good advice for me to hear right now, but hearing that when you're 17, that's really cool. So how can people connect with you, learn more about TCU, learn more about Explore Ranches? What's the best way? I know you're not as active on social media, which is probably why you get so much stuff done.
I tried Facebook for about 8 months, and I gave it up years ago.
Good.
But they can, or the Institute has a website, and it's on the TCU Ranch Management website. You can easily Google that and then look up what we do and who we are and how to contact us. The office number is there, and my email and Jeff's email is there as well. Explore Ranches. All of us have our Explore Ranches email addresses, and then we have a website now that we're live. And one of these days, my goal for our ranch is to start selling some meat straight off of the ranch.
Oh, cool.
And so one of these days, some people will be able to hopefully look up that website and order some lamb or goat or beef that was raised out there. So
yeah, well, keep me updated on that. Whenever that is ready, let me know, and I'll blast it out. But I'll have links to everything, TCU, Explore Ranches, all that. But, man, this was really fun. And, for as long as we've known each other, I didn't know a lot of this stuff that you told me. So I appreciate you taking the time. This was really cool.
Anytime. Well, thank you. I enjoyed it.
Hey, it's Ed again. Thanks so much for listening to the podcast, and thanks for listening to that particular episode. I hope you enjoyed it. Before you go, I've got 3 quick things. Number 1, if you like the podcast, please do me a huge favor. Either pass it along to a friend who may be interested, share it on your social media, and or go to iTunes and give it a 5-star review. All those things would mean a lot to me, and they would really help to spread the word about the podcast. Number 2, if you've listened to many of these episodes, you know that I love reading and I love talking about books. Every other month, I send out a quick email with a few books that I've recently read and highly recommend. The subjects are varied, but they're pretty much all nonfiction with an emphasis on history, biographies, adventure narratives, and topics related to the American West. There are no sales pitches for ranches, no spam, no other kind of nonsense, just books. So if you'd like to sign up for the list, head to Mountain and Prairie/reading, or just go to Mountain and Prairie and there's a massive tab at the top that says book recommendations. Click on it. There are a ton of good books that I've read. Some of the old email lists are on there. You can go crazy. There are a lot of books. And finally, if you know anyone I should interview for the podcast, please don't hesitate to reach out and let me know. All my contact info is at mountainandprairie.com, and I'm on all the social media stuff, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, blah, blah, blah. So feel free to reach out. I'd love to have some recommendations and suggestions of interesting people I should meet. All right, that's it. Thanks for listening. Talk to you soon.